Thousands of people have been taking to the streets of Indonesia's biggest cities. There's widespread anger and despair. How to cope with soaring inflation, afford a meal, pay for fuel. The demonstrators are demanding another increase in the minimum wage for next year. Trade unions warn the protests could continue until December and could include strikes.
Fuel price hikes make us scream. That's the message students here in the province of Aceh want to send to their government. All across Indonesia, labor unions and students staged protests against higher fuel prices, even occupying the regional parliament in Aceh.
It's a huge burden. It would normally cost €1.40 to use public transport for the whole day. Now it's only good for a one-way trip to school. Many of our parents catch fish for a living and depend on cheap fuel prices.
If the fuel prices stay high, the price of groceries will go up too. People's income is still very low, so we demand the government to reverse their decision.
The Indonesian government has artificially kept fuel prices low for decades. The recent hike, the first in 8 years, raised the price of gasoline by about 30%. The government argues it had no choice. They say the cost of state has already tripled this year, driven by soaring global energy prices. Now ordinary people will have to deal with the consequences.
This is the worst moment to increase the fuel price because as we see that there's a purchasing powers still recover from the pandemic after 2 years, and the impact of the fuel price is not only affecting transport, it's not only affecting manufacturing product, but also affecting 64 million small medium enterprise.
2 fuel brands receive state subsidies. Initially, they were only intended for the poor, but everybody uses them.
The government now acknowledges that the flow of subsidies was not well targeted. Apparently, 70% of the cheap fuel has benefited middle and upper classes rather than low-income Indonesians.
A cash handout equivalent to €10 is now supposed to cushion the impact of the price hike on millions of poor families. The big question is, will this be enough to quell the anger in Southeast Asia's largest economy?
Asran is an economist with the Centre for Indonesian Policy Studies in Jakarta. Welcome to DW News Asia. Governments around the world are subsidising energy costs. Indonesia is taking those subsidies away. Why?
I think it's because it has been put a huge burden in Indonesian national budget. We know that there has been increase in the global oil price since in the beginning of 2022, but the government still maintained its subsidies until until August. So in Indonesian national budget, the assumption for the subsidies is the price should be like $63. But when the oil price increased to more than 100, I think it's already been huge burden for the national budget. And I think the government they don't have any choice anymore. So that's why I think they take out the subsidies.
So the system's become unaffordable, but I find it interesting that they're only just working out now that a lot of these subsidies weren't going to the right people.
We cannot avoid that kind of situation. Every time the government talk about subsidies, people's assumption is the rich people will get the benefit from that. But we cannot take out subsidies because of the assumption. If we would like to afford the rich people to obtain the subsidies, just like the poor people, we have to tight the monitoring in the gas station. You just have to put more control in it. Like you monitor the gas station so that the rich people cannot get the fuel subsidies. But when you take out the subsidies, it will affect the poor people. The poor people will be the one that will be affected more because it's not only affected how they will get the gasoline or the fuel, but of course it will affect their consumption as well because the food price will increase and everything in Indonesia will increase because of this subsidy has been taken out. And it will be affected the poor people the most.
Well, Indonesia already has one of the highest poverty rates in the world at 9.5%. Could all of this backfire? Because these sorts of protests have brought down governments before in Indonesia.
Every time the government increase the fuel price, there will always be protests because it will affect the poor people. The poor people in Indonesia allocate their budget for consumption, for food consumption, like 50% of their budget for food consumption. And now, when the subsidies has been reduced by the government, of course, the food price in Indonesia will increase, and it will affect the poor because they will have to spend more money to buy the food. And yeah, we can see maybe in the future. I mean, we cannot predict what will happen right now because if we talk about poverty, it will take a little bit longer to calculate it, especially in Indonesia data. But I'm assured that the poverty level in Indonesia, especially for the number of people in the poverty line, will increase in the next couple of months.
Haswan, can I ask you, is it time for a rethink in Indonesia how public transportation and transportation is done? Because average fuel consumption in Indonesia is 13% above the global average because of the millions of motor vehicles that zip through the cities.
Well, yeah, regarding the public transportation, most people are using motorcycle in Indonesia, especially for the big cities. Even in Jakarta, the public transportation like bus, people use it, and also like rail station, people use it. But in another province, like in another Java Island or in Sulawesi or in Kalimantan or Sumatra, people use their own motorcycle. So when the fuel price increase, it will affect their means of transportation option. Maybe they will use public transport, but I think people will still choose the same mean of transportation, especially in other island, not in Java Island, I think.